Welcome to the first episode of the Super Fantasy Bros podcast, which is part of the Triple Play Fantasy Network. I am one half of the team, Kevin Coleman, @boys_22, and I am joined by my co-host, Jacob Dunne. We are both excited to be a part of the Triple Play Network. We're equally excited here to help you win your fantasy league, because that's why we're here. We're here to help you win. We like to win. We are not losers, so that's kind of the part of it. Jacob, why don't we tell our listeners, everybody out there, why they should trust you, a little bit about your background?
Absolutely, man. First off, I just want to say how excited I am to kick off the show. I have been chomping at the bit for weeks now, and I'm so pumped that it's finally here. I am the other half of the Super Fantasy Bros, the Luigi, if you will. You can find me on Twitter at Ain't Done Yet, and Dunne is spelled D-U-N-N-E. I've been a fantasy sports athlete for 20 plus years now. You know, I started playing when I was 10 years old, and I remember my first fantasy football team had Brett Favre on it, and he led me all the way to the fantasy championship game. I'll never forget that. So I am an expert fantasy ranker on Fantasy Pros, where I got top 5 in the quarterback rankings in 2020. And I also finished in the top 40 overall amongst the 300 plus experts a part of the competition. So on top of all of the contributions to Fantasy Pros, I am a contributor at RotoWire, as well as a fantasy analyst on New Life Fantasy. It's been an incredible journey, and now my number one goal is to help you, the listener, win your fantasy football league.
Yeah, as you guys can tell, Jacob is definitely the better one of the group. I am just here just to guide him, and he's going to help you a lot, probably more than I am. But, you know, you can find me at Fantasy Pros too. I'm a Devy featured writer. I do a lot of Devy stuff, Devy Royale. Dynasty is really my main focus, where Jacob is more of a redraft kind of guy. So our whole goal of this was to give you two perspectives. Jacob's going to look at redraft, and he'll dive into Dynasty just like I will with redraft. But ask you questions, you know, waiver wire stuff during the season, anything like that, we're going to be here. We're your guys to talk about. And we're just going to dive in. And I think a little bit about where we wanted to go with this first kind of podcast here is talk about our strategies. So we were looking at, like, how do we attack? I know there's a lot of startups going on, especially for Dynasty. A lot of people have already done 100 because they're degenerates. But if you haven't yet, we're going to look at the first part of the day is like, what are your Dynasty strategies? And then we're going to go over our redraft strategies, kind of how we do it. And like he said, we've been doing this for a while. I think I remember drafting Drew Bledsoe in a league. That's how old I am. Like, that's how that goes. And not like the Cowboy Drew Bledsoe. So you can go farther back from me. Like, I know how to kind of work these leagues. I've been doing it for a while. Dynasty, I've been playing exclusively for 4 or 5 years. So why don't we dive into our Superflex Dynasty kind of leagues? And that's what we're looking at. So typically with Dynasty, what I'm trying to do is it's 12 teams. It's a typical 10 spots, okay, with a Superflex. And so generally 10 to 12 players starting lineups. And so you're generally drafting around 28 guys. That's kind of consensus. Is that kind of where you're at, Jacob, with Dynasty?
Yeah. If you're doing like a one quarterback league, this is a one quarterback Dynasty league, right, Kevin?
No, this is Superflex. So this is going to be, yeah. So generally, one thing I will say of the listeners out there, and I know a lot of guys on social media do this, but Superflex is starting to become all the rage. So Superflex is really starting to become kind of like 80% of leagues filled this year on DLF with Superflex, mocks Superflex. So we're going to be focusing mainly on Superflex because I think it values the quarterback, which it should. Right. I think that's key. So yeah, you're looking at that. And so when you're looking at Superflex, I think the hard part about Superflex right now going into this year is that really there's 25 startable quarterbacks. Like, once you start getting into the 26, 27, 28 range with quarterbacks right now, it's getting a little tough to distinguish. Hey, who am I taking? Yeah, Locke, Bridgewater, Darnold, those type of guys, you get a little nervous as your QB. So that's kind of where you're at. For running backs, you know, we obviously there's 32 starting running backs, but some teams support 2 or 3 different kind of running backs there. So like the 49ers, right? What are we going to do with the 49ers this year? It's a nightmare. The Patriots are always a nightmare. They've been a nightmare probably since me and Jacob started playing fantasy. Like, it's just, that's who they are.
Right.
AJ Dillon, the Times back in the day, like those type of guys, like they still had like the committee, the Texans. So realistically, you're looking at like 28 startable running backs.
Mm-hmm.
Wide receivers, there's tons. I usually, when I do a startup, I'm looking at 2 per probably team. So you're looking at 50 options there. And then tight ends, really, there's about 10 quality options. And you can maybe make the argument there's 5 or 6 this year, but we're generally around there. So really what you're looking at is about 120 of legitimate players on your roster. So that's literally 10 rounds of your dynasty draft. So literally when you're building your teams, you need 10 rounds of that dynasty startup. And that's kind of how I look at it. So from the first perspective, first kind of give you advice is you want to get as many draft picks as you can those first 10 rounds. Either trading up, moving up. Don't worry about those 14, 15, 16 startup picks. You want to try to dive into those first top 10 rounds and not give up too much draft capital because that's where the players are.
I'll be honest, Kevin. I'm usually one in a dynasty startup to just sit on my picks and let everyone else do all the trading around me because I am honestly too scared to give up the capital in the 4th, 5th, and 6th round to move up and then not have that foundation on my team. I know that the foundation is the first few rounds, but then I'm just like, I want to keep my picks at least in the startup, but that's just how I do it. And I don't know if that's going to be perceived as lazy, but I don't want to screw myself in the later rounds. But what you're saying, Kevin, is like, you need those guys in the first 10 rounds. Like it's okay to sacrifice a few late round picks, like, I don't know, like your 7th round and 8th round pick to move up in the 5th round or something like that. Like,
well, okay, so you can do it like that. Now, I'm like you. I'm hesitant to trade because, first of all, I think I struggle with startup value sometimes. Like, I'm like, hey,
right.
Where do I move back? What I tend to do, and this is kind of how I build my rosters, and this is the stuff that we were going to talk about tonight, is that I will move my first round pick. So most of the time, I don't mind moving my first for, like, let's say a 2nd, a 4th, and then the first round next year, like a 2022 first round draft pick. And then I don't mind even moving further back and just accumulating as many picks as I can from that 3 to 7 range, and just accumulate assets. So it's not really giving up 7th and 8th, not trying to move up to the first, like trying to just collect as many assets you can from rounds 2 to 7.
So
that's how I build it.
You think that's better than just getting that stone cold first round pick? Like, you know, let's say you have like the 5th pick and it's like, well, I'm going to go with Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson, like just like start with that all-star quarterback. You would rather build like a deeper foundation in like the 2nd and 4th round.
You can, right? These are all different strategies. I think one area I like to do is do that because what I do, and I don't mind if you trust the league that you're in, the Dynasty League, what I do, I like to build my rosters around stud wide receivers. So if I can move back into those 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 range, my stud wide receiver is going to be there. I build up through that youth, get a quarterback, and you can get a guy like Trey Lance right now, Justin Fields, some of these younger guys, and build up through those wide receivers. And then I'll get a running back at some point. But I'm notorious zero running back guy. So if you listen to this podcast, I am a zero running back dude. I like the zero running back. That's just my strategy, and it's done well for me. I know that, in Dynasty, because I think in Dynasty, the values of running backs fluctuate so much to whereas wide receivers are not. So for example, like these are some young stud wide receivers that I'm targeting right now in my leagues. And then this is all, it fluctuates. And even now, some of these guys might be better value. So first guy I'm going to mention is AJ Brown. Now I know we've had some news recently about Julio, but in Dynasty, Julio doesn't scare me. And he's my wide receiver 1. He has been for this whole offseason. Right now he has an ADP of 25. So you can get him about round 3. So let's say you move back from your first round pick. You collected additional assets. So let's say you grabbed a 2nd round pick. So now you have 2 seconds and then a 3rd. So realistically, you could still grab a guy like Alvin Kamara, who has an ADP of 16. So he's going in that mid-2nd round. And then let's say you want to grab a quarterback. So let's say you go Kamara, Lance, and then you get AJ Brown. That is a realistic outcome. Would you like that start, or would you be a little nervous about that start?
So I am just a little nervous on Trey Lance, not his talent, because his rushing ability is insane. I just right away, I don't know what his playing time is going to look like. Like we know that Jimmy G is notorious for getting hurt, and he could step right away and just be this rushing phenom, which I think that he will be, which I know that you think he will be, Kevin. Like, I know that that's your boy. I'm I'm a little bit hesitant on Trey Lance. Actually, I was just asked a really good question here, Kevin, if I can, if I may.
Yeah, let's go.
If you had if you had the first pick, are you going chalk with Trevor Lawrence in a Superflex Dynasty rookie draft? Or are you thinking about Lance or Fields?
If I have the first pick, I'm going Lawrence. I'm not going Lance yet. Like I'm going to go Lawrence. I'm going chalk. I'm taking the guy that I think has the higher upside.
Yeah. And he's probably the safest out of all that bunch, just because he's guaranteed that starting role from the get-go. So then you have the second pick. Are you going Lance or Fields?
I'm going Lance.
Okay.
And he was my QB2 for a long time. So everybody out there that's listening to this, I'm a big Trey Lance guy. I believe in his talent, believe what he has. And I love that offense that he went to. And I love the weapons around him. I love Shanahan's offense. So I'm going Lance at the 102. I've done that in some leagues this year in my rookie drafts.
All right. Yeah. So for me, it's almost a coin flip, but I think I lean Fields only because his competition in college was so much greater than Lance's. We haven't seen Lance much against, like the top defenses, which was the argument coming into the draft, and it wasn't big enough for the Niners to pass on him. So, I mean, that gives us hope. That's like, okay, if the Niners see him as a franchise guy, I should see him as a franchise guy on my dynasty. I think that Field is a little bit more safer because we've seen him do it against greater competition in college. But I mean, you can sway me with Lance because I know that he's much more of a rushing quarterback than Fields, and I love my rushing quarterbacks.
So I think this comes down to this with you, and this is good just because we're all talking about strategies now. When you do go into a draft, and I saw this question today, and I was on social media, it was interesting. So do you draft ceiling or floor? What do you look for?
Okay, so I more lean towards floor, especially with my early picks, just because I do not want them to bust, and I want a foundation so that I can go for that higher ceiling later. How about you?
This is where we're going to differ because I swing for the fence. Like, I love ceiling. Like, I'm like, so when I see Lance, I see ceiling, where I think Fields has a safer floor, right? Like, we know kind of what we're going to get with Fields. He can be good. And I love Fields too. Like, don't get me wrong. But when I see Lance, man, I see that ceiling and I just gravitate towards it. I love taking home run shots. Now, sometimes I'd mess up. Like sometimes I'd take some guys and they fall. But when you're looking at, and that's why, like with this strategy that you have, like let's say, like, so for example, if we draft Kamara, that's more of a win now dynasty team. Like you taking Kamara, he's a little older. But in this scenario, if you had 2 picks, if you move back, you could realistically get Swift, AJ Brown, and then Trey Lance. So now you have that kind of issue. So that's kind of where I go with that. Like if you can accrue, get as many of those things. The biggest thing I can say about Dynasty is don't force running backs. So stud running backs are a premium asset. So if you need to get one, fine, but they're really volatile, right? Like look at what's happened to Gurley. After 3 years, Gurley's what? I think he's dead and he's 25, 26, and he's just gone.
Right.
Look at Zeke. Zeke is getting drafted in the 4th round of dynasty startups right now, which is disrespectful. Like we don't need to go there, but I mean, but if he's getting drafted that late, look out, and he probably spent a first on him last year. So like that's why I don't reach on running backs. I don't force them. I let them come to me if they fall. Okay, I have value. I have value. And that's kind of how that works for me. But I look to target those, and especially right now. So everybody out there in a startup, 3rd to 4th, 5th, 6th round, you could get legitimate wide receiver ones, like legitimate wide receivers. So like AJ Brown, CD Lamb is going in round 3 or 4. His ADP right now is 41. So you can grab CD Lamb in the 4th and have your wide receiver 2. Imagine pairing AJ Brown with CD Lamb together.
Oh my goodness.
And then you have Swift and Lance, right? Because you traded back, you were able to accumulate assets. That's a hell of a foundation. Like that's how I build the team.
I like that a lot. Instead of just having like a rock star and then a bunch of questionable floor ceiling type guys. Like, I think that the only way I take a running back in the 1st is if like CMC drops to like the middle of the 1st. I mean, like he's like an outlier guy, but I agree with you in a dynasty startup, trading back is the way to go. If you can't trade back, I like to just go after my quarterbacks. I'm going to get my young you know, I'm going to get my young stud quarterbacks early and often in my first 2 picks and figure the rest out later.
Yeah.
What do you think about that strategy?
No, I think that's good too, right? But I would say right now in dynasty startups right now that I've seen, especially the quarterback position, you're going Mahomes, Murray, Allen, Dak, Jackson, and Herbert, right? Then it gets very who knows? Like then it's okay. It's going to be Burrow, Lawrence, Wilson. There's a big teardrop between quarterbacks.
There is Watson, which we're going to talk about later. Like you just don't know what to do with him right now. So
so I don't mind that strategy. The only thing is if you're out of that top six, then what do you do? Because you're probably going to get CMC drops to you, which is it's fair. So like imagine you go to CMC, whatever. But when you're in that 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 range, it gets a little dicey. And that's why I don't mind moving back a little bit and just playing the board. Or if you have a top 5 pick, imagine what the value is. Now, I will say a lot of people are getting smarter and they're not trading up. So they don't want to give up too much capital. Right. So I think one thing I've been seeing, one strategy I've been using, so instead of like trading your first for a second, fourth, and a first next year, I've been going a second, fourth, and like a 10th. I'm not going for the first next year, but I will I will start with that. But if I can just kind of accumulate as many picks I can in the first 10 rounds, I'll do it. And then I'll just adjust my values as I go.
I actually kind of prefer the 10th round pick in a startup than a first round pick in the next year, just because I like those known guys who have produced, and it's going to help your team compete that year. So I prefer the 10th pick that year than the first round pick next year.
Yeah, no, and that's fair, right? And I think it's all about adjustments because people are starting to catch up. Like 3 years ago, you could trade back all the time because people wanted to come up and get Barkley. And then Barkley gets hurt, and then their roster is screwed. So I think it's all about adjusting. Here are some other guys. You tell me what you think about these guys. So Jamar Chase is going at ADP 44, so round 4. DJ Moore, he's going at round 6 right now. And then like Brandon Ayuk is a guy that I'm really targeting. He's in round 7. Wow. So those are like wide receivers that I really like to build around. Do you have any opinion on those guys, or how do you feel about those guys?
The only one that I have question is a Jamar Chase. And I guess you're getting my strategy out now in Dynasty, and you're figuring out that I don't like to swing for the fences that early. Jamar Chase, he does seem like a very safe Dynasty asset in rookie drafts and startups, but he just hasn't done it yet. And I would honestly rather have DJ Moore over him because I know that he's done it. He has big play ability. He's done it at the pro level, and he's still young. So, DJ Moore in the 6th is much better value than Jamar Chase in the 4th. That's just me. I wouldn't blame anyone for taking Chase because his 40 time, his size, his chemistry with Burrow, it is hard to pass up because that's pretty safe. And then you said Brandon Ayuk in the 7th. I love that because he is the real deal. So I would definitely take him in the 7th because he would be my wide receiver 2, probably 3, like my
probably
3rd.
3.
Yeah. So, that's great value in the 7th.
Realistically, depending on how the board shapes, that always matters. You could literally start, like I said earlier, you could start a draft where you get Lance, AJ Brown, and Swift, come around, and you're probably not getting CD, but you probably could get maybe Jamar. So now you have a nice young nucleus. Now, if you don't want to go Jamar, there's plenty of people around Jamar right now where you could probably – it just depends on who's there. You could probably get Darren Waller is around that ADP, and you could – DeAndre Hopkins is Calvin Ridley. So, there's some guys. I think you're a Ridley. I feel like you would grab Ridley probably.
I would absolutely grab Ridley.
Yeah. So there's dudes, right? But I'm not wasting my picks. So once you start getting into that 4th, 3rd round, you're looking at Mixon, who I love, but Mixon, Sanders, CEH, some of these other guys, I'm okay moving past them because the overall value of my roster is, imagine if Jamar Chase hits, let's say Justin Jefferson. I know it's a lazy comparison, but just bear with me. So let's say that he is Jamar Chase. He has that ability. But then you pick Miles Sanders, who now we realize Miles Sanders is just another running back. He's never going to be more than a running back 2 at best. But now you have a wide receiver 1 on your roster has value for 3 or 4 or 5 years. That's why I tend to hit the wide receivers in that area. But I will grab a guy like Swift early if I need to, those type of guys. And that's kind of how I look there. Now, as far as quarterback goes, I've always been a notorious wait on quarterback guy in redraft. Dynasty, I like to get guys like I've gotten Mahomes, but I don't reach on quarterbacks either. But here are some guys that I actually tend to like in superflex formats where if they're your QB1 or 2, QB2, I'd get a little worried if any of these guys was your QB1. So Jalen Hurts is going round 3 right now. ADP is 29.50.
Round 3 in a startup superflex?
In a superflex.
Wow. Okay.
So I think that's pretty good value, depending on what you think of him. He's going around that QB 14 range. So if you can get him as your QB2, so like in a startup this year, I got Kyler Murray and him. So those are my 2 QBs in superflex, rushing upside. Yeah, and so that's kind of that's kind of what my strategy. Tua, he's going in round 4. So value, like that's what I'm looking at when I see these startups. Carson Wentz is going round 6, so 60.50, and then I got to include my boy Sam Darnold because if I don't, Twitter will come after me. But Sam Darnold's coming at round 8. Okay. So and then that was another startup I did this year. I ended up getting Dak at the 106, and I got Darnold in round 10 as my QB2, and I just filled in value in between there. And now it's a little bit of a risk with Darnold, but I'm expecting him maybe to be able to put up QB2 numbers. So essentially that's what I'm looking at. So, and that's kind of how I look at it, and I kind of move and I go through it. So, if you look there, I'm just looking for wide receivers that can approach 100 targets. I'm looking for young stud kind of wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 options in that round. And I'm going to queue as many 10 rounds, as many picks in those 10 rounds as I possibly can. So that's kind of how I go into a start. Now, everything changes based on how strategy plays out and everything, but that's really what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to acquire as many assets as I can in those first 120 players.
I love it. And I want to piggyback off of your Sam Darnold love here. I think he's going to be forced into he's going to creep up into top 20 numbers this season just because of the weapons around him.
Yeah.
DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, CMC. I think he is destined for a bounce back.
Yeah.
A bounce back season, and he is going to prove his doubters wrong. Like, I have all the faith in the world in him, and it's mostly because he has an amazing cast.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. And if you listen to the podcast, we have a YouTube channel. I did a whole breakdown, 25-minute breakdown of Darnold with offense, everything there, video. If you wanted to take a look, you can go there. So that's kind of how I do my dynasty stuff. Jacob, why don't we get into redraft? I know a lot of people play redraft, so we definitely want to attack that for you guys out there. The whole point of this podcast, especially for Triple Play Networks, they focus a lot on interviews. They do a lot of other stuff. Like, we're just here for strategy, how the heck to help you win. Guys we're looking to grab, like those type of things. So when we're thinking about redraft, which I will be honest, I actually didn't play in one redraft last year. I stayed away. I'm in a couple this year. So, but I didn't actually do redraft. First year I never did. I kind of missed it. I missed it just a little bit. So What are we doing with redraft this year?
Man, I love that fresh start every year. I mean, like, Dynasty has its perks for sure, but I love just that fresh start. Yeah. It feels great. So, and what's funny about doing a redraft league is that strategies change year by year. So I could be giving you a completely different strategy by next year, but we're talking about 2021. Okay. So here's how I'm attacking this draft. I have my tier 1 running backs and my tier 2 running backs, okay, who I want to grab in the first round no matter what. And that is CMC, Dalvin Cook, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Ezekiel Elliott, Jonathan Taylor, and Nick Chubb. Those are the running backs that I will confidently take in the first round. No questions asked, because they are the only ones that I trust with the full workload. I know, like, you're probably asking, like, oh, but what about Kareem Hunt with Nick Chubb? I'm not worried about Kareem Hunt. We saw what Nick Chubb did even with Hunt in the lineup. Nick Chubb is a beast. You need to draft him in the first round. After all those running backs are taken, and let's say you still have a first-round pick, you're towards the end of the first round, all those backs are taken, that's where I grab Travis Kelce. I am not messing around with my tight ends this year because I used to pride myself in streaming tight ends, and I still think I have a very successful hit rate when it comes to streaming tight ends in the past. But last year, I think I was like, oh my goodness, like 30%. It was just like, and I can't, like, raise your hand and tweet at me and DM me if you had success streaming tight ends, because it was a literal crapshoot last year. It was ridiculous. So it has taught me, if all those running backs are off the board, I am targeting Travis Kelce for sure after all those backs are off. Just the positional advantage that he gives your team on a week-to-week basis is incredible. And I just want to set it and forget it, not stress, not try to hit these streamers, because tight ends are super rare. That productivity, you need to grab Kelce in the first, or think about grabbing Kittle and Waller in the early third. So if let's say that Kelce's gone, that's the only time. That's when I will shift to Devontae Adams, a Tyreek Hill. It used to be an AJ Brown, but he kind of got pushed back a little bit in my rankings after the Julio trade. I think that there's a lot of he only got pushed back to wide receiver 6. He was my wide receiver 3. He's now my wide receiver 6. So I still think that he puts up great wide receiver 1 numbers, because, as we saw last year, Julio isn't invincible. He missed more time than he has in his career. And if anyone has ever owned Julio Jones, that like every year for the past like 6 years, he always comes in questionable.
Yeah,
so I don't think that the Titans play him every single snap. I think that they lower his snap count to keep him healthy all season, which means that AJ Brown should still eat, and you should still trust him as your wide receiver 1.
And he doesn't score touchdowns. Like, Julio drives me crazy because he always never scored touchdowns, and it was just a frustrating thing. And well, I want to stop you for a second though. So I have 2 questions for you in terms of redraft. So, are you worried at all about Barkley's injury?
I actually am not, just because I always think back to Adrian Peterson and how he tore his ACL, and then he came back and had a career year. And Saquon is that type of freak, that like athletic profile. Like he is just a monster. So I am not worried about him. I would draft him after CMC, actually, which is kind of a hot take because it's always CMC and Dalvin Cook. And then it's a mix of like, all right, you want Barkley, you want Henry, you want
Taylor.
Right. So I would actually take him third. I would think about him at second above Cook, but it's dicey. So yes, I am not worried about Saquon Barkley.
Okay. And then the other thing is with we got to worry about Aaron Rodgers a little bit. But the nice thing about redraft is we should know by the time you're doing a redraft draft what's going on with Rodgers. How high are you taking Justin Jefferson then? Where's Justin? Because where is he at in your kind of like wide receiver tier?
Justin Jefferson is just in my low-end wide receiver 1 tier. He's like my wide receiver 10 to 12 range. Now, he would be higher if I knew that the Vikings defense was going to be the same lackluster defense that they were last year. But they are getting back monsters like Anthony Barr and Danielle Hunter on the line. I think they're going to be a lot better than last year just because they're simply getting healthy. So I don't think that's going to make Kirk Cousins throw as much as he did last year, because as we saw last year, I was a Justin Jefferson owner, and he just had a dud first half, and he turned it on in the second half, and he won me a few weeks. I just don't know if the Vikings will need to do that with an improved defense. So I am fine with waiting on Jefferson. I'm not going to take him in the second round, but I'd be happy if he was my wide receiver 2, like in the third round, if it just so happens to end up like that.
Okay, that's fair. I just, redraft has always changes my strategies, because seeing Justin Jefferson not go at either the beginning of second in Dynasty is like, oh my God, what happened? What happened to this? Because he's going so high. So it always ends in there. I think Adams is there, and I think you're right about tight ends. I am done streaming tight ends. Like I've kind of moved it to where I have a top 5, and even in redraft, I still feel like Hawk's a pretty good pick this year, and I still think Fant is good. I still believe in him as a talent, and Mark Andrews too. So they're okay, but once you there's a clear tier, right? And then it just goes. But that's kind of how I feel. Where are you taking Pitts then? Like how comfortable in Pitts in redraft then?
That is a great question, and I actually moved him all the way up to tight end 4. Like he is just above T.J. Hawkinson and Mark Andrews. So I think with Julio gone, Kyle Pitts is going to take some snaps as a wide receiver, if not half of his snaps. I don't see him being a traditional tight end. he was going to be that probably with Julio there, but now that Julio's gone, they need to maximize their weapons. And all they have is Ridley, and they have Hurst. So, Pitts isn't forced to be a tight end like a traditional tight end. So Pitts could line up in the slot. He's going to see a ton of targets. I just don't see how Kyle Pitts fails.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, I don't know. You took an unnecessary shot at my guy, Russell Gage, though. But no,
I didn't mean to do that.
No, Russell Gage is there, right? Like, he's going to get some targets.
What's funny is that I moved him up the farthest because I had him at, in my 70s, and now he's up in my 40s, So it's like he moved up like 30 spots, which is insane. But yeah, I mean, he's going to get a ton of targets too. I appreciate you bringing him up because he is a sneaky wide receiver 3 for you, who could have some boom weeks. But to answer your earlier question, I am willing to take Pitts. I mean, with the tight end landscape nowadays, I'm willing to take him. Whew, man, in the 5th round. Is that too crazy? Is that too high? Is that not high enough?
That's probably not high enough right now. It probably depends.
Probably right.
Probably on the. I saw him go tight end 1 in Dynasty, which I get, but
I understand that.
Redraft, I can see him going pretty high. And some best balls that I've done, he's gone in the 3rd round.
Okay. So if we are talking best balls, he could have some blow up games. I'm just thinking like rookie tight ends. They don't usually have a super successful first year, but Kyle Pitts is an outlier. So if somebody wants to take him in the top 3 rounds, I'm going to let someone else do that, but I'd be willing to reach like in the 5th, in the early 5th, once I have my 4 foundational pieces, like my running backs and my wide receivers.
Okay. All right. That's fair. All right. Well, after you get that, we talked about Adams, Kelsey being there. After you do that, what are you looking for next in your redraft league?
Yeah. So I didn't mention this earlier, but I don't even open up the quarterback browser until my running backs and my wide receiver starters are set. Yeah. There's an exception, like let's say Lamar Jackson falls to the 5th, and I already have my 2 backs and my wide receiver 1. That's when I would maybe take a chance on Lamar Jackson if he falls, just because that rushing ability is insane. But other than that, if I don't get a cheat code quarterback like a Lamar Jackson, a Kyler Murray, then I am going to wait, and I am going to stream quarterbacks because I love streaming quarterbacks, and I am, I'm not too I'm not too proud to say like I hit at streaming quarterbacks. Like I love streaming quarterbacks. I do a ton of research. I look at their past games. I look at the defense. I look at who's out, who's in, and I love picking those streamer quarterbacks. So that's a little plug. Like I like to do like a weekly streamer thing for quarterbacks. So, you can be on the lookout for those tweets in the season. But, I am not even opening up my browser until like the 5th round, like my quarterback browser until the 5th round, because I want my running backs for sure. Like I need my 2 running backs. Like the perfect scenario is, let's say a Jonathan Taylor with like my 6th pick, and then Cam Akers in the 2nd round. Like to get those 2 backs, I would be thrilled. And then I can look at the tight ends in the 3rd round. Like hopefully grab a Waller or a Kittle or even a Pitts, in the 3rd or 4th round. If value dictates. But yeah, I mean, I would definitely go. I don't know about you, but would you consider drafting Lamar Jackson or a Kyler Murray in the 5th round, or are you just like, I'm not even touching my quarterbacks until later?
The only guys I will touch that high is if they have a rushing upside. So if they can rush and they can score touchdowns and give me those points on the ground for the Konami kind of code quarterbacks, I don't mind kind of reaching, right? Because there's only a certain of them that are different. But I have always found that in redraft and even in best ball kind of formats, I don't take a quarterback. I mean, because it's just your waste, especially because of it not being super flex, the value is not going to be there for a lot of these running backs and wide receivers. I mean, probably the 5th round in running backs is just desolate. So you're really looking at, okay, who can I grab? And I'd rather take that value. Now, it just depends on how they fall. But if it's the 5th round, I don't mind taking a guy with rushing upside, who I think Lamar actually is probably a value right now in a lot of leagues. And he's going to be a redraft value. So I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all. So I'm interested here. So the 2nd year running backs, You have Swift, you have Akers, you're going to have Taylor. You got all these different guys, Gibson. Of those groups, so of that kind of that second year running back, who are you most comfortable taking in redraft? It may be Taylor's probably the most, so after Taylor.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, Jonathan Taylor is my stone cold. Like, he is that guy that I'm taking in the first round. But after that, it's a great question, Kevin. Cam Akers is that next guy that I am trusting fully, and I hope to get in the second round. Antonio Gibson, to me, has so much upside. He probably has the highest upside in that group just because of, he used to be a wideout at Kentucky and stuff. And Ron Rivera loves to just play his 3-down backs, as we saw with CMC. Yeah. But he comes into training camp with that toe injury, that lingering toe injury that I guess has never healed. So that kind of scares me from taking him at least in the second round. I might let someone else take him unless he drops to the third. So I would feel most comfortable after Jonathan Taylor and Cam Akers. I'd feel most comfortable actually taking Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I know it's like, what about Swift? I am kind of worried about the words of Anthony Lynn saying we're just going to ride the hot hand, and that Lions offense is not going to be good. Like, it's going to be a dumpster fire on most weeks, unless Swift breaks out and just has crazy games. He's going to have to do it by himself. Yeah. And that doesn't give Swift a very high floor for me. And you know me, Kevin, I like the floor. I like the floor, and Swift to me now loses that safe floor to where I'm not going to reach for him unless he comes in the third round. I would be comfortable taking a wide receiver if Cam Akers, Jonathan Taylor are off the board in the second round. So I want to get your thoughts on that too, Kevin. What are your thoughts on Anthony Lynn saying that he's going to ride the hot hand with Jamal Williams, who he was handpicked off of free agency? Does that scare you at all as a Swift owner, as a Swift manager?
I don't think so. I don't listen. I try not to let coach speak, because Anthony Lynn, he's the offensive coordinator. Like, let's be real. Like, Dan Campbell's going to get in there and say, hey, we're going to give our playmakers the ball. So Anthony Lynn doesn't definitely like what he was saying. I try not to use coach speak to be like, oh, I got to change my values and change my rankings on it a little bit. I do think that Cam has a lot of upside because I think they're going to rely on him, but they still have Henderson there too. Like, Henderson's no scrub. Like, Henderson's going to get some goal line work. He's going to kind of vulture some touchdowns. I still believe in Swift. Williams is a good running back, and he's going to take he'll take some targets away. I think that's for sure. We're going to see that. The thing that worries me the most about the Lions is not necessarily their coaching staff. It's that the offensive line's okay. It's gotten better. They've improved it. It's their lack of receiving weapons. Because I think that they're going to stack the box. They're going to see game schemes against them, game scripts against them on the defensive side. So I think, does Swift have the talent to do that? In Dynasty, I think he's a surefire. I'm taking him. In redraft, like you're mentioning, I'm getting more nervous just because I don't necessarily trust those weapons that they have.
Right. Absolutely. And you're the type of Dynasty manager to pounce on that coach speak news and, and try to buy all of the Swift shares that you can, right?
Oh yeah, I've been slowly collecting my shares as I've gone, man. And that's just how you have to do it. Like, you use those type of like that news day when it comes out, and you just pounce on weak owners. You can't be nice, like, especially in Dynasty. You're trying to win. Like, I'm not your friend. Like, I'm gonna win, and we're gonna go attack these things. What are you? I have a question real quick, and then we can kind of go on. What are you doing with Najee Harris then? Because he's actually, I've seen him ranked a little higher than Antonio Gibson and CEH. Okay. I've seen him go in the top 10 of redraft kind of rankings before. Do you have him that high, or are you a little bit nervous about him?
No, actually, I am very, I'm bullish on him just because of his opportunity and what he showed at Alabama. I think that he's one of the safest backs to pick. I would feel comfortable taking him. I would still pick Antonio Gibson over Najee, but I would take him over Clyde Edwards-Helaire because I have Najee as my RB14 and Clyde as my RB15. So I would take Najee. To me, is one of the safest running backs, and that you can take this year in Dynasty and in a redraft league. I know that we haven't seen him, and I was talking about earlier, I like guys who we've seen. Well, Running backs is a little bit of a different story. I remember talking to you earlier, Kevin, and you said that running backs really only have maybe like a 3 to 5 year window, to dominate, right?
Yeah.
So Najee Harris, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't he like 23, 24 years old?
He's 23, I believe. He's a little older. He's going to be 23.
He's a little older, which to me in a redraft tells me that he's mature and he was in the Alabama system. He knows what to do. He's a smart guy. So that raises my confidence level. And the fact that he has no competition makes me very bullish on him in redraft leagues. And I would take him in the second round, probably in the middle.
All right. No, that's fair. I mean, yeah. So what Jacob was mentioning earlier, I look at my running backs really as 3-year guys, assets, and Najee is a 2-year asset for me. So I will draft Najee. I have 1 share of Najee. That's it out of all my leagues. And so I'm going to ride him for 2 years, and then before the 3rd year, most people keep that 3rd year and then try to shift him. But I would rather be 1 year early than 1 year too late. And I'm going to try to sell Najee after he has 2 very good years. Say, hey, who wants a running back 1? And then try to collect assets as much as I can, especially if you're a dynasty player out there. 2023 is a heck of a class, a running back class. We could be looking at 4 or 5 running back 1s in 2023. Okay. So that would maybe be a good time to ship those. But that's how I look at it. And that's kind of where I'm going with Najee. I think he's going to be good. And I don't mind that. I would take him over CEH in a heartbeat, but I'm a CEH hater. So sorry, Mindy out there. But yeah, I'm not a CEH guy. I'm staying away from CEH.
I'll stand up for CEH a little bit just because he doesn't have any competition this year, because Damian Williams is gone. There is still a Darrell Williams there, but I'm not too afraid of him. I think it's going to be his 2nd year. He can still make that 2nd year jump. He's been learning. He's with the greatest offense in the NFL. And Andy Reid is an offensive genius, so he's going to figure out ways. I have faith in a bounce back. He could, what's crazy is that he has one of the most highest ceilings, but he also has a very scary floor. So I would trust him in the late 2nd, probably early 3rd. I'd rather get him in the 3rd as like crazy value, because that would be value for someone who's starting on the Chiefs offense. But yeah. Clyde is scary for sure, but I'm going to buy him. I'm going to buy that somewhat of a comeback season, even though he didn't have a horrible year. He just wasn't consistent. So I think he's more consistent this year.
I just don't think he's good out there. All listeners out there, if he's good, you can come after me and you can pepper me. But I was not on the CH train last year. I will not jump on that train next year. So we talked about quarterbacks, kind of went into that. Are there any guys that you're maybe looking as like you can get them later? Because I used to wait till like the 10th, 11th, 12th round, grab Phillip Rivers. That's kind of my mainstay back in the day. Are there any late quarterback guys that you're looking for?
Absolutely. So if I'm not going to get crazy value on a Lamar Jackson or a Kyler Murray in like the 6th round, then I'm waiting late to grab a Daniel Jones. I actually believe that he will have a good year because, like I said about Darnold, he has he has Barkley, he has Kenny Golladay there. He still has Sterling Shepard, who is extremely reliable. He has Evan Ingram. He has all these weapons around him, and plus he can run. He has that rushing ability. I am willing to forgive him for tripping on that one play when he had like a monster 80-yard run and the turf monster got him. I'm willing to forgive him. I don't know what happened there, but he has that rushing ability. I can see him getting 30 to 40 yards a game. So I am comfortable either streaming him or taking him late. And also Kirk Cousins. I know I said that the defense is going to be better, but he also has those weapons. And the Vikings won't be perfect. So, they will have to come back from some games. So I think that Kirk Cousins is safe. Daniel Jones is safe. I would like to stream some of those guys. And I also think that Sam Darnold is going to be streamable for some games. And I like Ryan Fitzpatrick, Carson Wentz, and I also like Cam Newton, as long as I don't think that he keeps the job the whole year, but Cam Newton has that rushing ability. He has much better weapons. So I think that he can be a low end, a sneaky high end quarterback 2, a low end quarterback 1 on most weeks, as long as he keeps his job, because Mac Jones is looming. But those are some quarterbacks I'd feel comfortable taking late or just streaming.
That's fair. I still think Derek Carr's a value, like weirdly, right? Like that would be a guy that if I was kind of looking at it, like, hey, I'm going to target him at the end.
Yeah.
If I can get Derek Carr as like either my QB2 way late or just a QB1 and later as the draft kind of falls to me, and then I can stream, I can follow Jacob and get all his great streamers, and I can just kind of go from there. I actually think Carr with those weapons, Brian Edwards should come on. Ruggs is there. You're going to see kind of them using those running backs in different ways, but he can always have those blow up games where you can be consistent. So I like Derek Carr. I think he could be good there. All right. Well, so that's some draft strategies. You got anything else for us?
Yeah, so I'll just say again, so it's RB, hopefully, but then I will grab Kelsey if that tier 1 or tier 2 is off the board, and then I'm going to look at my wide receivers or my tight ends. Like, it's all about, like, you can't just have a closed mind when going into a redraft. Like, you have to just go with the flow, and that's why you guys need to mock out there on any platform. Just mock, because you need to be ready to change your draft strategy on a whim. Like, you need to follow where the value is. So don't just go in being like, okay, I'm gonna go RB no matter what, and then your RB2 is someone who's sharing the backfield just because you wanted that RB and you skipped out on a value of a wideout like an AJ Brown. Like AJ Brown, I heard, is falling to the 3rd or 4th round, which would be insane value. I would love him as my wide receiver 1 to pair with my 2 running backs. That would be insane. So that is one bit of last strategy. As we talk more, as we do more shows, Kevin, I just want people to know there is no set draft strategy. You have to be flexible and you have to just go with the flow.
Yeah. No, I think that's like in any draft. Like when I did my dynasty strategies, that stuff can go out of the board real quick when someone takes somebody. You're like, wait, what happened? Like you just took Swift at 110. Like, wait, what? So like it can definitely affect you a little bit. And I have found that in dynasty and in redraft, people want to get their guys. Like they'll just go grab them, and that is what it is. So you got to really adjust. So mocks are always important there, and we had that. So I think that everybody out there, you should listen to this. I mean, that's kind of the strategy that we've done, and it's worked for us. Like you try to grab those assets, and if you've never done dynasty before, the first one, it can be like, oh my god, what is this? And it can be challenging. You're taking the wrong guys. So mock before you ever do a dynasty one. Listen to us. Go on their rankings. Look at what we're doing. And try to find it. So I know you have a question for me, so I figure we would end it there. We'll talk about this. We always try at the end. We're going to ask this questions kind of about our own roster, so you can kind of get them and what we're dealing with as managers too, because we play this game. We're just like you guys. We're degenerates just like you.
That's right, Kevin. All right, man. As the dynasty aficionado, I lost in my dynasty championship last season. I have Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson as my quarterbacks in a 14-team dynasty league. If Watson has to miss the 2021 season, would you look to unload a 32-year-old Russell Wilson for, let's say, a top five rookie pick and quote unquote, like tank, like for, so that I can have the top pick in 2022? In other words, would you try to rebuild as a Watson dynasty manager or sit tight? Because there's no way I compete if Watson has to miss next season.
Yeah. So a couple of things. So right now I probably wouldn't move anybody yet. So what I would do is I would wait until August. And then what's definitely going to start happening is injuries are going to happen. We're going to see guys get moved. Rodgers might get moved. That might just kind of destroy someone else's quarterbacks to where they'll pay you a little bit more for a Russell Wilson. And I will say right now, the only thing that worries me is Russell Wilson's value is not as good as I think people are expecting in Dynasty. He's not super old, but I think the value isn't as good as it needs to be, because I have Russell. I've tried to get rid of him. I actually, and really, I have a couple pulled up. So this is in a 14-team league right now. This is what he went for. Russell Wilson went for Baker Mayfield, Noah Fant, and a 2022 second.
Oh, that seems low to me. That seems like value for Russell.
That's low, right? So and recently we're talking about top 5 picks here. Russell Wilson went for the 103 in this year's draft, but they had to add the 104 or the 204 and the 211 on top of that just to get the 103, which I don't mind.
Worth it.
Yeah, if you're going to get Fields or Lance, those guys, and you have that quarterback. As far as next year goes, the quarterback class next year is going to be an interesting class. So the one thing I will say is you're looking at Rattler or Sam Howell. And then after QB, those two QBs, there's a very big tier break. We're looking at it. You're going to maybe get Carson Strong from Nevada, Matt Corral, Malik Willis from Liberty. Can he step up and step in there? Keaton Slovis has some question marks. JT Daniels has some question marks. So when you're looking at like the question marks at that position, you better hope, especially in a 14-team league, especially for the quarterbacks, because I know what those kind of can be like in 14-team leagues, that you get a top 2 pick. Because if you don't get either Rattler or Howe, who have question marks as well, that QB 3 or 4 could be like we saw 5 go in this last first round. I think that we're going to see the median come back a little bit with our quarterbacks. You're not going to see 5 guys get drafted in the first round. Right. So next year might not be the year. 2023, though, you have a couple good prospects, Bryce Young, DJU from Clemson. You're going to have a lot of different guys there. So I would hold tight right now with Deshaun and Russell. Wait until the season comes and see if some guys lose some quarterbacks. And then you can always just start one quarterback and you could probably tank that way too. Just start one quarterback, fill it in there. But I would wait because those values aren't there yet. The value is not good enough. I need an injury or something to increase Russell's value.
I love that, Kevin. And I just want to say how valuable your Devy mind is right now, because I do not dive that deep into college. And I know that you do. That is your thing, which makes you extremely valuable to the show and just to the fantasy world. So I appreciate your mind, my friend.
Yeah, no. Hey, I'm going to definitely make some mistakes. That's what we're here for. But we're going to help you out as much as we can. And that's what I would say. So I want to say I appreciate you guys for tuning in on our first show. If you ever have anything, we have a Twitter account, the Super Fantasy Bros. If you ever have questions, just hit us in those DMs. Find us on social media if you have it. If you listen to the podcast, make sure you subscribe and let us know how we're doing. Anything else, Jacob?
Yeah, I just want to say how it has been an absolute pleasure going over strategies for Dynasty and with Redraft. I look forward to doing future shows with you, Kevin, like future mock drafts, and analyzing specific players. If any of you have questions out there, on players, on how to attack your draft, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Ain't Done Yet, and Dunne is spelled Dunne. Or you can tweet at this show's Twitter, which is at Super FF Bros. So go follow that account, and we will follow you right back. Other than that, it's been an absolute blast, and I hope that this has given you guys a lot to think about heading into OTAs and in training camp. So I just wanted to say, God bless you guys, and thank you so much for tuning in.
Yeah, and if you ever want to find us in the live stream, we will be live streaming every Tuesday, God willing, unless I get sick again, at 7:30 Eastern. And we'll be here and we'll be there. But always on the podcast, look for our episodes to drop every Wednesday. And we appreciate you guys. And so until next time, we'll catch you guys later.